Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is now just gone 2 o'clock, so I propose we make a start. So first of all, I'd like to welcome members of the committee. First of all, just a reminder that this meeting is being webcast, and I'll just quickly outline the emergency evacuation procedure. We're not expecting any alarms, but if an alarm does go off, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area that you came in through, go out the main door, turn right, go down the bottom of the ramp, and if you can then wait by the western front of Bristol Cathedral until you're signed off, because that is the assembly point. My name is Councillor Tony Dyer, and I'm the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee. Diagonally to my left is Councillor Caroline Goots, who is the Vice Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee. I will allow other committee members to introduce themselves as and when they ask questions or make points. If we move on to agenda item number 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies today from Councillor King, and Councillor Dudd is substituting.
Thank you, Ian, and welcome to Strategy and Resources Committee, Councillor Dudd. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask committee members if they have any interest to declare in relation to the items of business on the agenda? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I would like to move the minutes of the meeting of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee held on the 18th of November as a correct record. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you. Are there any comments about the minutes before we put them to the vote? Okay, can I ask for councillors to say aye if they're willing to support the minutes? Thank you. Agenda item 5 is Chair's announcements. I have no Chair's announcements today, so we'll move straight on to agenda item 6, which is public forum. There are up to 30 minutes available for the public forum. The questions and replies were circulated to committee members and published on the website in advance of the meeting. Each questioner is permitted to ask up to 2 hour supplementary questions in total, if they wish. A supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or the reply, i.e. entirely fresh questions on other subjects are not permitted. So we have 8 public questions that have been received for this meeting. Questions 1, 2 and 3 are from Suzanne Audrey. Suzanne isn't in the room today, but she will have received written responses to her questions. Question 4 and 5 are from Matty Edwards about council debt collection. Is Matty here? Okay, questions 6, 7 and 8 are from Joanna Booth, who also is not present. All questioners will have received written responses to their questions. We'll therefore go on to public statements. We have 2 public statements, and I can see that there are people here for both of those statements. Thank you for coming along. So I'll start with you, David.
Thank you. So my question's on the base budget, really, or statements on the base budget. The base budget contains money for Bristol City Council, but it also contains money for the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Avon and Somerset Police Service. But under the West England Mirror Combined Authority Act, it also requests a levy to be made by the 4 UAs, including North Somerset, for bus services through a joint, it's called a joint, it's a joint authority commissioning statement really in the Act. Now, the levy's been frozen in South Gloucestershire, Baines and Bristol for the last, I think, 4 or 5, maybe longer years. But the cost of running buses, paying RMT and Unite drivers, maintenance facilities, inspectors and managers has gone up. And the government has given us some bus service improvement plan money, about 13.5 million. And with North Somerset, it's another 4 million, that becomes about 17. But the question is for the West of England Combined Authority, is that the bus services we run now are not enough money coming into the pot from the 4 UAs to maintain those services next year. So what I've asked you today is to have a serious discussion as we go towards the budget and the scrutiny, I believe, is in the middle of January, and discussions with the Combined Authority, which I know is ongoing, about how we maintain the city regions bus network. People have to go to work, they have to go to school, they have to go to hospital. Tourism is the economy, the nighttime economy. Councillor Rippington, as chair of the buses committee with Ed Plowden, is obviously looking at spending 4.5 million of CAS money, but that's not going to be enough to maintain the city's bus network. So this needs some serious discussion. WECA has not got bus service improvement plan money coming out of his ears to do supported bus services. And we're going to set a bus, a cheaper fare than £6, you'll be pleased to know, Leader of the Council, on the 18th. I think that'll be far less than that, maybe about £4.40, something like that. Sorry, £2.40, something like that. But nevertheless, it's very, very important that we find a way forward on the levy. So all I'm asking today, as the report never mentioned legally the levy, and I would have thought the legal officers would have picked that up, because you collect money for WECA through your levy, which is in the Act. So I'd ask you, as we don't have precepting powers down at the West England Combined Authority, and we do need to all work together, because today is Devolution Day. With WECA being in special measures, we're not able to move forward to Tier 2 and get extra money, because the government will not give us any extra money until we come out of special measures. If we're going to merge with Somerset, Gloucestershire, Wiltshire or Swindon as a bigger authority, which is what the government's probably looking at, but we won't be able to move until we actually get the authority back out of special measures. So my plea today is please talk to Baines, talk to North Somerset, talk to South Gloucestershire, and really find a way forward to sort that levy out so the people of Bristol and the region have a reasonable bus service. And that can include also talking to Somerset and Gloucestershire, because bus service is coming from those counties as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Statement number 2 is Rosa Cowan Gary Byard. Gary, I believe you're speaking to this one.
I am, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, all. Obviously, I work on, alongside with David on with buses and trains. And basically, my consideration basically is the bus cuts, basically what's happened in Bristol and, of course, across South Gloucestershire and the West Country. Particularly the 19 service, which runs from Bath, used to go to via Bristol Parkway Railway Station to UW, University West of England at Frenchay, which now only terminates at Downend in the evening. So really speaking, after the community, it's cut off, like from Southmead Hospital. Students that can't basically get to Bristol Parkway in the evening, and I mean, really speaking, this all should be funded. I mean, the Y6, we used to serve Chip and Sobley, only goes now as far as the 8. It's shocking. I mean, I used to work for First Bus. I used to do nights around the depots, and it used to be good services, but now it's appalling, and they just seem to I know James Freeman very well, and he branded all the buses up, and now they just stick any bus now which is branded on any route. They don't care. The transport levy needs to, it needs to have more funding in the transport industry, really speaking, to try and get these buses basically back priority, and get a decent public service basically. I mean to get to Downend, I think even the 48 and the 49, I think that's even been cut in half as well. It's when it used to go to Emerson's Green, it now goes to Downend and Staple Hill. But people need, lives beyond that, it's no good. It's shocking. It's some of them can't get home. It's after a certain time in the evening, so they need to look at this transport in Bristol and see what, get more funding and get the buses back to basically how they used to be and all that.
Thank you, Gary. All I would say is that we are working with the West of England Combined Authority and the unitary authorities, and we will do our utmost to play our part as well. Thank you.
Chair, quick point of order before we move on. is there going to be a report back from the budget subcommittee, the finance subcommittee, to this this meeting, as we discussed at the last meeting? We're going to start receiving those reports.
Well, the finance subcommittee is still in the process of meeting at the moment, and there will be some public meetings coming forward from that. But yes, in the end, the budget has to come back to strategy and resources because we have to approve the budget to go forward to full council. But yes, I believe the anticipation is that there will be ongoing communication backwards and forwards. But I can get more details for you, Tim, as we go further down the line. And we can discuss that with the chair of the sub-finance committee as well.
Respond. There is going to be a report back to strategy and resources, but there's nothing before that that's planned. And if you had requested, then I'm sure officers would have given you the timeline about when that will come to strategy and resources.
Yeah, I did request at the last meeting, so
We'll look into what information that can be provided back, but we do have a process where the finance subcommittee is responsible for looking at the budget. That's a cross-party committee, which include Labour members on it as well. But I'll weigh the matter and see what additional information can be provided. But that finance subcommittee will be, as previously been the case under the previous administration, as met in public to share information. In this instance, it will also come back to this Strategy and Resources Committee for a public discussion, and then it will also go to full council for approval.
okay. I think it was more about the process, of just interested in how the process is working under the new system, and brief report on that would be useful.
I'm sure we can get a report about how the process is working, because I am aware of that. It appears that not all councillors seem to be aware of the process, indicated by failing to turn up for meetings where they're being briefed on key elements. Councillor Mack.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record sometimes on how it feels like subgroups and cross-party groups and committees work. And I sort of keep coming back to, I would hope that an amount of this work happens within party groups. So you have members on the finance subgroup who they've been given a beautiful report on what that process looks like. And it's very similar to what's happening in different policy groups, that the feedback within a party. I think, that's the point, that we have cross-party members within a group. So hopefully that can be fed back within the Labour group.
None of that's in the
Sorry,
public,
Tim.
though.
This.
Okay.
You made your comment. I'll give you a response. This is an item on the agenda. There is a responsibility for all members and representatives of each party to feed back the process. There are Labour Party members on the Finance Subcommittee. There are Green Party members. I think there is an element of responsibility for those members to make sure they keep the rest of their group informed. But as I've said, I'll bring back a fuller update to the next meeting, or we may arrange a briefing beforehand if that's too late. Okay. Bear with me because I've lost my place. Right, so first agenda item after the public forum is agenda item 7, which is the Transformation Programme Quarterly Update. This report provides an update on the top 4 council transformation programmes: Adult Social Care, Our Families, Children and Education Programme, also known as the Families First Programme, currently being scoped, Property and Tackling Homelessness. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information purposes. I would like to invite Tara Dillon, Head of Portfolios, Programmes and Projects, to introduce and outline the report. Tara.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, the paper that you've got is just giving you an update on the position with the top 4 transformation programmes, as Councillor Dye has just outlined. I think the things to note is just a slight change in terms of our budget position. So there's 15.9 million has been assigned to the transformation programmes in total. So that's 13.7 million is a total forecast spend and 2.3 million contingency. That's a slight increase to the budget that was baselined originally. However, there's also been an increase in the financial benefits that the programmes are delivering. So that's risen from 15.7 million to 17.5 million for 24-25, as well as all of those programmes doing works to enable further savings delivery in 25-26. The other thing to note is that all of the programmes are working on their business cases for the next phase of work. So this is looking forward to 25-26 and beyond, and putting together those business cases that will come forward to the relevant committees around March, April time next financial year. And that will be seeking drawdown against the transformation reserves that will be put forward as part of the February budget. The only other thing to notice then is that the report highlights the current status for all of the programmes. So each of the programmes do report to their respective committees as well. I think the only thing to note in there clearly is that the Our Families programme, as Councillor Dye has mentioned, is being reformed into the Families First programme, and that full business case is coming forward to the Children and Young People Committee on the 23rd of January for approval.
Thank you, Tara. Any questions or comments for Tara? Councillor Malik.
Just with regards to the business case, I suppose, are there kind of lessons from past phases of this transformation programme that were taken into account when delivering the future case? I mean, is that informing the work? Can you reassure us that that's informing the work?
Absolutely. So yeah, part of the whole business case build specifically asks for drawing on examples of learning from previous phases of work, and that is used to inform the deliverability of the next phases of work. So that is incorporated within the business case. It should be evidenced as part of that document coming forward, and that certainly is something that the various teams are building in, specifically around deliverability and costs and timeframes for that. So yeah, that is absolutely part of the business case build.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, for the clarity of the committee and for benefit of any members of the public present, the recommendation is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the update report on the top 4 transformation programmes. Can I ask that the committee therefore notes that report? Thank you. Thank you, Tara. We'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is investment to purchase properties for use in temporary accommodation. This report seeks approval of investment for the acquisition of up to 75 homes for use as temporary accommodation. This is a key decision as it involves spend over 500k and impacts on 2 or more wards. This report includes an exempt appendix, Appendix E, which has been circulated to members in the event that any member wishes to raise a matter specifically in relation to the exempt information. It may be necessary for the committee to move into exempt session for that part of the meeting. I would now like to invite Louise Davison, Head of Housing Delivery, to introduce and outline the report. Louise.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so as the Chairman has just said, this report is brought to you today to ask for your approval for the in-principle support for the investment of capital investment to purchase up to 70 homes or 75 homes from the open market to use as temporary accommodation. Members will be aware from the work you've been doing around the transformation programmes that there is a significant cost to the council around subsidy loss from using private sector TA, and the use of our own accommodation for temporary accommodation helps significantly address that. The properties, as it's outlined in the report, and the business case that accompanied it will be acquired through the General Fund, utilising the general power of competence, which was conferred to us by Section 1 of the Localism Act 2011. And this is an approach that many local authorities have done across the country on a similar or even larger scale than we have. We already have an existing acquisitions programme in the HRA, then that is using a one-stop provider who we have in contract with us to purchase, find properties on the market, bring them to completion, and actually then now carry out all of the work that's needed to bring them into use. And the HRA development team will continue to manage any programme of acquisitions which will be funded through the general fund. These properties will enable us to move 75 families out of either non-self-contained or expensive nightly self-contained properties, reducing the net cost to the council and providing a much improved outcome for many of our vulnerable households. It's estimated that we could be making a saving of up to £2.2 million a year if we were to buy all 75 of these properties. At the end of the 5 years, these properties could either be retained by the council for TA in the general fund, used for another housing purpose within the general fund, for example, to house clients from our adult social services commissioning colleagues, or to meet other housing need. We could consider selling them on to the HRA to form part of our general housing stock, or they could be disposed of on the open market. Any decision today to progress with the General Fund Acquisition Programme will be subject to the 25-26 budget approval in due course. And what I would like to point out is a late addition to the paper that you have in front of you as an appendix was the information item around setting up a council-owned RP, and just drawing attention to that. The full business case for the new co-RP will be worked up during 25-26, will be brought back to this committee in due course for approval. And again, that work stream is around making sure we have a good supply of supported temporary accommodation and other affordable housing in the district. So I will happily answer any questions you might have about the development, the acquisition process for this. But I am joined this afternoon by Jez Sweetland and Andrew Stansbury from the Tackling Homelessness team, who will be able to pick up any questions you might have on the technical, legal and financial side of the proposition.
Thank you, Louise. Do I have any questions or comments for Louise? Councillor Whippington.
So, these 75 properties, is this all to be purchased out of the current year's budget? Is that why it's coming forward now, or is this a staggered programme over time?
This is a budget proposal for 25-26.
Okay. And do we think 75 is the maximum that we can go to under this proposal? Because obviously the savings, are very valuable.
I'm sure Jez will be able to come in on this if he needs to. What we have discovered in the HRA programme is we've had a budget. Sometimes we can buy properties that are less expensive and sometimes more. So the 75 is an aspiration within that budget that we've set based on some work that was done around average property prices. It might be that you can acquire more, it might not be. So it really depends on the properties that the company find in the market for us, and whether we consider those to be the best value for money for the council when we look at the purchase. So it's an aspiration to get to 75, could be slightly more. We don't really know at this time until we start actually looking at the programme. Jez, have you got anything more to say on that?
Just to add, this is all contingent on obviously the full council approving the full budget. So the capital ask has been really worked out with our strategic finance colleagues as well, looking at what we think is credible for next year's budget. So if you're saying all things equal, could we find more money and acquire more in the market? There is more in the market, certainly, and we've got the partner. But that particular ask is around what we think is really going to be credible for the wider capital ask within the wider council budget coming forward next year, which is obviously being worked on with the sub-finance committee at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Blenkinsop, then Councillor Malik.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. On that point of value for money and the possibilities around that, I note that it doesn't seem like we're looking at one-bedroom properties, which is probably sensible for temporary accommodation on the whole, but would that be something that we'd consider looking out for as an addition to the programme? If there was a property that was particularly cheap, but a one-bedroom property, it would seem less than sensible to not acquire it. So is that something that we look at in terms of the value for money, or...?
I think it really depends on the entire circumstance. Generally, the accommodation we need to buy to maximise the savings will be accommodation we can use for families. And a one bed, you could argue, probably isn't the most suitable. There's also the challenge that most of the one beds will sit in a leasehold block. And again, that creates an additional challenge for us in terms of having a single property where there's another management company and service charges. So I would say it's unlikely, but something could come up that is really appropriate for us to acquire. But generally, I would say that's not going to be a priority for the programme.
No, but it's good that it sounds like we're being flexible. Thank you.
Councillor Malik, and then I have Councillor Goots.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably a question for Jez. I'm just wondering the 5-year cycle on this. Can you expand on that, and why is it just 5 years?
Yeah, so I think it's clear to us that there is a real clarity of thinking around what if in 5 years the whole housing benefit regime changed. So one of the things that the challenge was building a programme that is accelerating our own stock, putting that into the general fund where there is capacity, but also with a clear exit strategy. So the idea was to, working with finance colleagues, build an investor save that works within that near term. Let's be clear, we are not suggesting at this day and age that after 5 years we're going to dispose of those properties. What we're saying is that's what will be built within the capital programme. Clearly, within the realities of where we are in the housing crisis nationally, there's probably going to be many opportunities to retain and hold onto that stock. As Louise referred to, pressures in adult social care, etc. So the idea is to show this stacks for 5 years. That is the investor save. We are not in any way proposing at the end of 5 years they would be disposed of. The idea would then be to make a decision about how best to continue to use those homes, and it could be to continue as they are. So let's be clear, this is about making the real short-term investor save stack and then making that longer-term decision later about the best continued use of that stock. Within the legal context of this, what we also wanted to recognise is it's important there's an exit strategy. So what's clear is if we had to, we don't think we will be put in this position. There is always also an exit back to sell these back to the open market. So that was also a way of ensuring the short-term credibility, savings and control for the council.
And in terms of, there's 1,600 households in temporary accommodation. This is 75 units. What percentage of those people do you think, because units could be, some of them could be housing more than one or two individuals, obviously families, so the 1,600 are we going to cover about 10% or not of?
So we'll work out the final numbers. I think under the transformation programme, what we're absolutely focused on is increasing supply in every way possible. On Friday there was a committee paper looking at using a more difficult decision, arguably, about general needs to TA. So one of the things we're trying to look at is how do we ensure that we're looking at every opportunity to accelerate that supply for where we can control cost, but not just cost, also provide a much better outcome for some of the most vulnerable in our city. The supply then is also looking at social rent. So in terms of numbers, once we've got that detailed programme, which we're already starting to look at with Simplify, we'll be able to come back to you and do you an update about how many specific households and numbers. Back to the earlier question, we would look at one bed. Actually, we're trying to prioritise slightly larger housing because that's where we get more people out of TA, but also subsidy loss is better savings for the council. So we can come back to you whether we've got a more detailed programme to update on.
Yeah, because value for money, it's a lot of money we're spending, and if it's not kind of accommodating a fair chunk of people, then we need to rethink.
We've got a very detailed programme how we track subsidy loss, and we can actually model that per household, the cost savings. I think it's also recognising if we don't do this, where these households will end up. So they will continue a much more expensive accommodation. Obviously, one of the priorities at the moment is also moving households out of hotels and B&Bs. So this also gives us more control as we engage back with the sector that provides our TA to make sure they're behaving, holding that sector to account. So a lot of this is also about the messaging back to that market of how we engage TA in the sector.
That's fine. It's just 33 is for 70 units, £500,000 roughly, something like that per unit. So just a bit worried about the costs.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit included in there. So it includes a refurbishment allowance, and then you've got the one-stop agent who does that searching. So the average price we modelled it on is between £360,000 and £420,000 for a 2-bed to a 4-bed, which is what we've done with the HRA acquisitions. They have been able to come in on average slightly under budget, so it may be that we could make that money stretch further. But what we'd hate to do is to ask to borrow X amount for 75 and it wouldn't go that far. So we know that with those costs it does work over that 5-year term, but we'll make that money, go as far as it can.
Sorry, just a final one. Chair, are these going to be all new builds?
I'll pick up on that one. So no, basically these will be any properties that are on the open market. It could be second-hand housing stock, it could be new build acquisitions. The scope that we've got currently for the HRA programme is about taking that view of about £25,000 to bring it up to an EPCC level and to our standard void status. So we're buying properties that are an asset to the council, not a long-term liability. Yes, if new build is available, we will look at new build, but that would actually really reduce the supply, particularly of the family housing we need to buy. So it's a range of whatever might be available on the market at the time. And what we've found is that Simplify have really learnt us over the last year. So they're now bringing properties forward that they know fit within our requirements. And what we're going to do as well is have a look at the scope we've got for the HRA, understand can that be widened or loosened slightly, because we're not intending necessarily for these to be a very, very long-term asset, because they may be disposed of in the future, giving us possibly a bit more scope of the types of properties we can buy in the city.
Councillor Goose, did you have...
Yeah, thank you. It's probably Jez that can answer this one. So the 33 million timelines-wise, is it going to be sort of drawn down in one go and then spent immediately, or is it over a rolling programme over 5 years? And a follow-up question to that would be, if we're doing it all immediately, can we expand it in the next financial year?
So within the Investor Save and the way we've modelled this, we are looking to acquire all of the properties next financial year, but we've got a programme, so obviously it wouldn't all come in on day one, so there's a programme acquisition. I think the question is the right one. Is there more capital there? And I think, again, that is part of then our ongoing work with obviously the wider context of capital within the council. So we are working hard around other Investor Save opportunities. We also are looking at other opportunities to bring in additional stock. So it may be that actually there's an alternative to just acquisitions, which is looking at a sort of leasing structure where our money would go further, but would create the same savings to the council. So we're keen to get this one moving and accelerate that supply. But what we are really clear about, back to Councillor Malik's point earlier, this is not the end of the solution. This is the beginning. So there's more to do, and we will be looking at other ways to increase access to market, access to commission new build, but crucially I think also other ways of bringing more financing, because we can't just keep putting all of this financial pressure onto the council. So we will be looking at other ways to bring other money in as well.
Councillor Dudd.
Thank you for bringing this paper. I've got a few points or questions. So the first one's on the partner we've got to help us buy these properties. So 14,000 per property is quite a steep fee, isn't it, really? And I just wondered that we've got kind of a fixed budget and kind of rough idea in terms of the numbers of properties we want to buy. So I just wondered why would we do that on a per property basis and not pay for them to deliver the whole package instead? I'm sure we could probably get a better deal if we did it that way. And just to add to that, what kind of competitive process did we go through to get this provider? And then I've got a couple of other questions after that, but if you want to answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we have actually been out through a couple of full competitive tendering processes through Constellia, who's our partner organisation in terms of tendering, and working with our procurement team. And the costs are competitive in the market for the amount of work, particularly that we're now getting Simplify to do for us. And we've scrutinised those quite carefully, including now compared to the pilot, we've brought our legal conveyancing work stream in-house. So that's actually being done now by our legal conveyancing team, as opposed to by Simplify, which it was in our pilot. So I think we're comfortable that we've been through an appropriate procurement competition tendering process, and that Simplify are the best people for us to do the job at the moment. I think, again, that point you make about having a block contract with one sum to deliver, they haven't offered that. That isn't how we've secured this process. The procurement we've done is part of a wider programme, so it will pick up the continuation of the HRA work as well. So those numbers might flex a little. I think we're really comfortable that for what we need them to do, this is actually good value for money for the council. They're providing a very good service at the moment and delivering at pace.
Councillor Dodd, if I can add as well, the other thing to bear in mind with this is speed is saving. So where we employ someone else to do some of the aspects of this work, the reason we're doing that in part is so that they can deliver the work faster than if we did it ourselves. And for every week that we save on that time is additional savings. So the way we've modelled this over, there's like a 3-month turnaround from when we have the purchase completed to when the properties can be tenanted. That's faster than if we did it ourselves. So whilst the cost might look, why don't we just do it ourselves, it's because it will take longer, and that then means the savings are less because it takes longer to get the properties tenanted. And in that 14,000, so you've got the fee for them to buy it. We've got our legal fees in there, so that's not just all going to them, that's our legal costs. Then we've got the project management, the refurb costs as well, that's just a sum on top of it's a percentage of the total amount. But there's one thing I'll promise you is we'll drive a good deal. We won't let them get away with it, Councillor Dodd. We'll drive a good deal.
Well, yeah, just on the speed point. So I went on Rightmove before I came in, and obviously we've got sort of an expected price to pay per property. There's a lot of right to buy property on Rightmove, a lot of leasehold properties. It's cash buyers only. And just looking quickly, I spotted 14 properties under £200,000. Why aren't we going out and buying them tonight, or either via this programme, or through the HRA programme? Why are those properties advertised on there? Because surely we should be out buying them first, and they shouldn't be on there very, very long, should they?
So Simplify will be out there looking within the budgets we've got at identifying anything like that, and they have actually already identified and are buying back a number of right to buy properties. So can promise from all the conversations we had last year when we were working up the programme around this and about making sure that we bought back our old stock, that is definitely happening. Once we have, and I'm being positive here, once we have approval for this programme, then Simplify will continue to look at those opportunities. I think the challenge for us in terms of this programme does come back about the longevity of the ownership of the homes. One of the things we've picked up with a lot of the right to buy properties that have appeared on the market is the additional cost that will come in terms of bringing them up to standard. So we're having to look at all of those issues. It's not quite as simple as just going, it's a really good plan to buy them back. But where it is good for us to do so, as either the landlord or as the general fund, we will be prioritising those units.
I must admit, some of the properties I saw, like a 2-bedroom flat in a masonette style house type flat, isn't it? That's what we call them. So we've got a great deal of experience dealing with those types of property. 160,000 it was advertised for. Why aren't we buying that property, for example? So we've got the experience of bringing those properties up back into good use, because it's a type of property we're used to. I'm just a bit worried that we're not taking advantage of that opportunity, and we should be. So
at the moment, there is no more budget for acquisitions in this year. So properties that we've got everything lined up, every property under offer that we are going to buy this year. With the next programme that we're talking about here, once we have the approval to do that, we will then start looking at bringing new properties onto that list to go under offer. Although we are actually already starting to identify properties that we might be seeking. So there is no opportunity today or before this decision is made to progress with this investment, to start engaging with property owners. There will be a missed opportunity if those units sell in the short term. But certainly when Simplify are looking, one of the priorities in the scope that we gave them was to look at our right to buy housing stock.
And it goes back to the point about how we exit from these properties after a certain period of time. If we're the freeholder of the block, then obviously we're in a much better position for the HRA to buy that stock, and it saves us money in the long run. because potentially we probably have to buy those people out at some point anyway in the next 20 or 30 years. So I think it should be a priority of this programme that firstly we should look at those properties before we look at any other properties.
I probably think it'd be a priority not to have sold so many homes under White to buy myself. Councillor Mack, you're next.
Yeah, I just want to ask, we've got quite a big programme and lots of different elements to looking at temporary accommodation, and I just wanted to check that that our success in other places might mean that this doesn't have the return on investment that we would hope. Is there a chance that our sort of front door, prevention from the front door approach and various other things that we are doing might mean that we don't need these houses in 3 years' time? Maybe wishful thinking there, but are we certain that we're not? Are we certain that we're not having too many responses that will mean there are no longer people in need of temporary accommodation?
What a great problem to have. I think, look, again, one of the reasons we've structured this is that the council itself will always have other needs. So in the context you're talking about, and we don't have a plan yet, by the way, to really address the TA, but we are hopefully starting to see real progress in terms of both the management on the demand side and the supply side, is that these houses will have opportunities for the council in other areas, such as adult social care, being sold back into the HRA. So the reality is that we don't think housing in Bristol is going to get cheaper in the longer term. So let's use that capital is our view now to start to really make interventions. Ultimately, what we also recognise, this is not additional stock in the city. So, other things we're working, of course, are also about really enabling and supporting additional affordable and social rent housing to be built. But this is something we can do today, which will meet some of that TA crisis. And then, as you say, if we were in a happy position down the road, we'd bring back to you ideas around what else should we do with this stock to serve those in our city. So, yeah, the need is there, and I suspect we will be grateful for it in 5 years' time still.
And we do have 1,500 households in temporary accommodation, of which at least a third of those are some of the most expensive properties. So we need to start to take action now. Councillor Whippington.
Thank you. Yeah. Obviously, the best way to tackle the homeless crisis is to be providing more affordable homes in the long run. So I'm pleased to hear that the new registered provider programme is still happening, and you mentioned about bringing that back to this committee. I'm wondering if you've got any sort of time scale on that. But also, I believe that programme was set up to buy something like 950 properties over 5 years. Is that a figure that's recognised anywhere, or if not, what is the current target for that, for buying properties into the HRA in the same manner as we're doing with these?
So we had a meeting this morning, actually, for a sort of a next step meeting with the consultants to Arcadis, who are going to lead with us to work up the full business case. And one of the things they were charged to do today was go away and tell us the timescale for giving us this full business case, and alongside that, working up the business plan for the new RP. So as of today, I can't give you much more than that. The new RP wouldn't be delivering homes for the HRA. It would be delivering homes for itself eventually, to hold. Whether those are going to be leasehold, whether those are going to be new build, all yet to come. I don't quite recognise the number you talked about there. We had some ideas in those very, very, very early stages around leasing initiatives in the private sector. This has evolved quite a lot since we first spoke about a new co-RP and what it might be able to do for the city. So I think at the moment, Councillor, it's all to play for. And literally, as of today, we started that process of taking us into that full business case work. So please bear with us, I think, is the message, and we'll come back to you with updates when we have more to share.
Any more comments or questions? Okay, in that case, I'll move to the vote. So for the clarity of the committee and the benefit of any members of the public present, I move that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, approves the proposal to spend up to £33,383,400 in Public Works Loan Board borrowing on the acquisition of up to 75 homes for use as temporary accommodation, subject to A, the full business case being signed, and B, the £33,383,400 or such said amount as agreed being approved within the Council's full budget for the 25-26 financial year. And 2, authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Section 151 officer and the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to sign off and implement the full business case. Can I have a seconder for the motion?
Seconded.
All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's passed unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Jez. Okay, we now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9, which is the quarterly performance report for Q2 24-25. This will be presented by Nick Smith and his colleagues. So I'll hand over to Nick. I think, Rebecca, you're going to speak first, aren't you? So I'd like to call on Rebecca Baldwin-Cantella, Head of Equality, Data and Performance, followed by Nick Smith, Strategic Intelligence and Performance Manager, to introduce and outline the report, or whatever order you're going to do it in.
I'll hand straight to Nick, who authored the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I said, this is the Q2 report, the standard corporate performance report. As is always the case, it comes with 2 appendices. The first is the Power BI dashboard, it's Appendix A1. That includes the data for all the business plan metrics and actions for all committees. The majority of the report here, though, is just looking at the metrics and actions specific to the remit of this Strategy and Resources Committee, and the other 7 committees get their own reports through this. It's all focused around the Council's current business plan, linked to the current corporate strategy. The other little detail to note, Appendix A2 then is just the details of all the actions and metrics and the management comments specific to the remit of this committee. The other point to note is bullet point 3 on the report is just noting a couple of metrics that have moved through committees, including one consultation ratio, which is now reported to this committee, which wasn't in Q1. Point 4 is then a summary overview of metrics for the whole business plan and the percentage that are on target or on track for that, and some city outcome measures, although there's only a small number of city outcome measures reported at this point in the year. After that, the focus is on the metrics for this committee only, of which 5 of the business plan metrics are significantly worse than target. They're the first 5 bullet points within point 5, the headlines for this committee, which include comments out on poor performance currently in agreed management actions implemented within agreed timelines. That's linked to audits that have happened internally. Procurement breaches, which is significantly better than it was, but still worse than target, and freedom of information requests responded to within the statutory requirement, which is improving, but still significantly worse than target. And then it's really for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gillandris.
Thanks, Chair. Most of the metrics obviously go off to separate committees, and they no doubt discuss them and come back with various points. We've just got a small number which you've highlighted for us on page 127, and the report is for noting, but obviously if the metrics are not good, and you've highlighted 3 that are not good, are we just supposed to note them, or are we supposed to ask for some more information? Should we be sort of saying, well, why are so many measures not being implemented quickly? I know it's not for you, Nick, it's obviously whoever the holder of that particular brief is concerned, but I'm just wondering whether we need to do more than just note, whether we need to note with concern or ask for more information on the points that you've highlighted for us, which obviously are not going as well as they might. On procurement, for example, I don't know whether that figure is good or bad, to be honest. It depends what other local authorities are doing. They may have just as many breaches or more than us, but I don't know the answer to that.
Paul, do you want to?
Thank
you. It's a very important question, I think, and a fair one, probably better addressed to me than to our colleagues from the performance review team, because it strikes to the heart of management, really. And so I think that what the committee is doing today is accepting a monitoring report, and therefore it is to note. But it's more than to note. I think it's for me as the current chief executive to say where you see these reds, and the commentaries are quite. I think they're quite good against indicators, in the sense that they provide insight into what's going on, and in some cases the reds are more concerning than others. So there are some reds which I think pose another set of questions as to why, and what we're doing about it, and others which are, in a sense, technical and closer to achievement, and probably wouldn't worry the committee so much. I think there is an issue about routine management compliance that Bristol has, and which we continue to work on as a senior leadership team, and it periodically rears its head in these failures to achieve routine satisfactory performance. So currently in this data set you see it in relation to management action following internal audit recommendations. And there's an explanation which I won't repeat now, but you can see it in the report as to why that is. And it may be that the failure is as much about managers recording what they're doing as it is actually doing something about it. So it may not be quite as worrying as it appears to be. It could be the recording of it that is an issue rather than actually the action itself. Nonetheless, I don't think that is a satisfactory account, because part of the management action is to record it. It's both to do something and to record it, because as with any other practice, social work practice, whatever, you both need to do, and indeed building safety issues, you both need to do a good job and record that it is done. Both are essential. So in summary, I think it's a fair question. If the committee decided that it wanted further, more detailed reports on any issue that's here, of course it's your prerogative to ask for that, and we could take it back. But rest assured, as a corporate leadership board and as the chief executive, we don't simply note these things, we act on them, and we do need to do more to establish a performance culture, I think, in Bristol. In other words, to be sure that we are addressing these underlying, in a sense it's a culture, which is we're not yet routinely achieving compliance with necessary standards.
Can I just add on to that as well? I think these reports are brought for us, and if they do raise concern, then I think there is the opportunity for us to put something on the agenda for a future meeting and bring out so that we can ask questions of the officers concerned. If I give an analogy, internal audit will audit certain areas of the council's performance, and if they have any limited or no reassurance, the management team responsible for that area are expected to put forward a series of solutions of how they're going to address those concerns or lack of reassurance. I see no reason why we can't do something similar in strategy and resources or any of the other policy committees if we chose to do so. Councillor Gooch.
Yeah, I was just, I've never worked in the public sector, only in the private sector, but from a compliance point of view, I think if we're finding it difficult to make sure that the compliance stuff is done, or at least it's noted that it's done, do you actually put it in people's personal development plans so that, when people are scored by their managers, that's one of the things that people are scored against, because that's a good way of making sure that things are actually done.
Entirely fair, and in a sense that's another way of describing the need for a stronger performance culture. I mean, I think that the evidence seems to me to be, in the time I've been in Bristol, that when we put our minds then to addressing a weakness, for example procurement breaches would be a case in point, we then make progress.
So the progress can be quite quick and it can be quite impressive even. But so I think that the performance culture is, and the target setting relating to appraisals and reviews that you describe is definitely present in Bristol and works in that way. But it feels a little bit like, in a sense, firefighting, because we deal with one issue that emerges as a weakness and address that, and then it emerges somewhere else. So I think the underlying issue is to achieve routine compliance on the relatively small set of requirements that the council has, that the things it asks of its chief officers. Yeah.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Mack, who was next on my list, I think it's also fair to say that we have seen a considerable improvement, and Nick and his team have, the way the reports are now compiled is I think, of a much higher standard than even a relatively short time ago. Councillor Mack.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about our performance around FOIs, but I'm not quite sure where to point that, so I'll probably just look at you, Paul. Yeah, it's still poor. It's barely improving. On what steps are we taking? What can we do to change the culture so that we are not failing on our FOI expectations?
Yes, I mean, I think that the performance on FOIs isn't satisfactory, and this both speaks to it speaks to the culture that I described of compliance, and potentially we may not have prioritised FOIs in the way that we should do as a local authority. So we recognise that members are giving this a big push at the moment, and that this is a priority for the council. I've heard that, and we're taking the necessary action.
Tim, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, this is just sort of following on, Paul, from what you were saying a bit earlier. Obviously, one of the ways that we know we're improving is by undertaking management actions in respect of audit findings. And the concerning thing about this finding here is that we may have taken those actions, or we may not have done, but we haven't put it in the system. Wouldn't it be a very quick win for us to make sure that every one of those actions is inputted into the system where we've done it, and then we would immediately see an uptick in this thing? I would have thought you could go around and tell every single person to get it into that system and get it done.
And that is exactly what's happening now. And I don't know if there's any more recent data that anyone has in the room that demonstrates that action, but that is exactly what has happened. And I haven't seen the results of that work yet, but they will be available very soon. It looks like, I don't know whether, it looks like Tim Borrett might have some more recent data, but you should expect a rapid turnaround in that performance.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have updated data, only anecdotal evidence from my own area, so this has been on the radar, and we've certainly gone through line by line and updated, so I know other directors have been doing the same. So we can take that away to the Chief Auditor and get an update from them. These reports are run by him, I think, quarterly, so we should see an uptick in the next set of reporting.
I suppose what's underneath all of these issues is for the council to give the clear message to its senior managers that routine compliance with, you might call these corporate health indicators really, is an expectation, and that senior managers up to and including members of the corporate leadership board will be accountable if we don't achieve that performance.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. There's lots to say about the finance one, but I'm going to skip that at the moment and go to the policy and strategy and digital priority matrix, which, if you have a look at the one that talks about the consultation responses, it's quite concerning that we're still suffering from not having the responses from the most deprived, the least deprived, and most deprived as well, it seems, in this. Is there any work that we've done to mitigate that? I mean, because it's a declining result. Is there stuff that we have planned that we're going to be... Sorry, Paul. direct question at Mr.
Yes, happy to come in on that. We do. We've got a standing set of plans that we try to apply when we're running consultations to try and reach groups we hear from less often. This has actually been an improving metric over several years. So going back 3 or 4 years now, I think there was a time when you would have seen for every response from somebody not living in a deprived area, there were about 2.7 to 3 responses from people in other areas. So we brought that number right down, so it's much, much closer than it used to be to an even number. And the way we've tended to do that is by direct engagement. So it's been people literally out on the streets with tablets getting responses. It's been targeted advertising. It's been working with grassroots community groups. So a real mix of methods to try and reach people. And that does depend very much on the consultation. And what we do tend to find is, depending on the consultation topic, we get very different responses. So I think it's picked out in the officer comments here. For example, when we did the Council Tax Reduction Scheme consultation, we had a much better representation from people from deprived areas because it was something that directly affected that group more than others. But where we have the sort of very universal level consultations, we sometimes see going to sort of older results of certain areas are overrepresented demographically. One thing this also does contain in the current data is a short break in consultation activity. So this is a rolling 12-month metric, and there were about 3 months of the last 12 where we had very little consultation activity due to the pre-election period. So some of the bigger set-piece consultations that may normally have run during that time didn't. So we've seen a slight slip back. I think we will be hopefully in a better place in the next quarter when we see the results of the budget consultation, which has had quite a high uptake. I haven't seen the demographics on that yet, but given the scale of that consultation, that's something that should bring us into a better position this year.
Thank you, Tim. Just one question on the next one down the line, which is the Equality Action Plan, the EAP. And basically it seems that the delay seems to be primarily due to funding constraints. Can you just elaborate on why that's such, from 90 to 79.5%? That's quite concerning.
Hi, I'll take that one because I'm also Head of Equality and Inclusion. So I think something else to note for this one is that we had quite a low level of people reporting on this metric as well. So it's not exactly representative of everyone. When the areas we have followed up with, there's a bit more progress than is reflected in that 79.5%. However, there's been a year-on-year increase for that metric. It's been getting better for the last 5 years, and this is the first year we've had a dip, and it's quite a significant dip. So I think there's probably something about those things starting to bite that people have been able to manage for a while, and particularly when there's been lower turnover or they've been losing staff, that gives them less ability to diversify their workforce because they're not bringing in new people. So that's something which people were repeatedly mentioning. And having a less diverse pool of applicants for technical specialisms. I mean, that's not new, but that continues to be an issue for areas which are harder to recruit as well. So yeah, those were the main reasons cited, but it is a worrying decline. And as I said, this is the first year that it's gone down, and we've actually increased that target year on year as well. So this was the first time it was at 90%, and the first time we haven't met it.
Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend.
Thank you. Just got a follow-up question to Abdul's actually, which is a little bit further along with the gender pay gap and the base pay gap. And it's good that those are on the up, but it feels like that's connected to what you've just been talking about. So what are we doing could you speak more to what we're doing about that?
I can't, because that sits with our colleagues in HR who are in terms of the corporate response. But I can tell you, I can tell you within services, it's really dependent on how familiar service managers are with their workforce diversity dashboards as to how much emphasis they're putting onto this. So that is something else we want to be encouraging people to do. Through their equality action plans, is examining their workforce through that lens and then thinking about what more they could be doing to reduce those gaps. But it's harder to see for your own areas than it is to see corporately. So that is something which needs continual reinforcement in each area to think about, even if it's not picked up as an extremely visible thing in your area. We all have a corporate contribution to that, but it's quite hard to draw those links for people.
Thanks. Is there any scope or plans for a bit of an audit about that, if it's sort of harder for various teams to sort of see it within themselves for a higher level of the organisation?
There's also, in terms of what information you can see, depends on, so some of the smaller teams you can't see as much information because it's sensitive information, and then it could be identifiable as well. But within the new workforce strategy, I know that this is definitely one of the focuses, is reducing those pay gaps, and it always has been in workforce strategies, but they've done a review of what's driving that at the moment, and will be thinking about how what their contributing actions are to that. But I'm not as in touch with that, so I don't know exactly where that's ended up.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, for the clarity of the committee and for the benefit of any members of the public present, this report is for noting. So I would like to ask the committee to note that Strategy and Resources Policy Committee notes the performance against the business plan overall, including the theme summary reports and issues raised, and measures to address performance issues to be implemented by relevant services. And that Strategy and Resources Policy Committees notes performance against the effective development of organisation theme in particular, including issues raised and measures to address performance issues to be implemented by relevant services. Can I take that as noted by committee? Thank you. We'll move on now to agenda item number 10. Once we've completed this agenda item, we may have a quick 5-minute, 10-minute break, because I'm getting looks from people at the moment. So agenda item number 10 is the IT hardware rolling refresh works, which is hard to say for somebody who has problems pronouncing their R's, so thank you for that. I'd like to advise the committee that this report seeks approval to procure and award a contract or contracts to enable an ongoing rolling replacement of IT hardware as it nears end of life. This will include both end-user devices, such as laptops, tablets and mobile phones, and infrastructure, including networks. This is a key decision as it involves spend of over £500,000. I'd like to invite Tim Barrett, the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital, and Gavin Arbuckle, Head of IT Operations, to introduce and outline the report. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of words from me and I'll hand on to Gavin. And one thing I do want to highlight in this report is, unusually for some of the key decisions you received, this is subject to further funding. So although we're asking for the permission to procure today, that will be subject to the Council's budget setting process. So this has been an identified need within the capital programme, but it isn't until the point that it's included within that programme and that programme is approved by full Council in February, if it is, that we'll be able to undertake the activity. So I just wanted to flag up that element of the report and recommendation for you. In terms of the proposal itself, this is really a move from some of the practice of the past, which has been what we call a big bang approach, where we wait for everything to need doing and we try to replace everyone's laptop at once, and that tends to create quite an unwieldy and costly project as a one-off exercise. So we're trying to move into something a little more regular, that's easier to manage within business as usual. It does mean stretching the life of some of the assets, but it means we can hopefully pick up and get into a decent rhythm of keeping people up to date with working equipment without replacing things too soon if it doesn't need it, and without incurring some of those overheads of those bigger one-off projects. But with that said, I'll pass on to Gavin to talk through the detail of the report. Gavin.
Thanks, Tim. I will confess, you've nicked most of what I was going to say. But essentially, I think to pick up on the key point, historically we have done this as a project or a programme, and previously we found that's actually made it on occasion more difficult. So in the last iteration, for example, there were 2 item lines. One of those was for end-user devices and one of those was for infrastructure. And we found that a different programme, some of you may recall, which was ITTP, came along and actually dealt with a lot of those issues. So that budget wasn't utilised. We reduced it, we gave money back, but we spent where we needed to. But what we do find is if, for example, we run out of money in the end user device column, but there is money in the infrastructure column, we then have to also incur time, cost to create change requests to move that budget across. Whereas for myself as quite a simple IT bod, it's all IT, they're all computers. And so what we're looking to do is to simplify that for the authority. We will not do it via a project or program perspective. I will take that within my team and we'll do a rolling replacement. We do know who you are and what device you have and when we issued it. So we can actually create that. And it equates to approximately 6 laptops a day that we'll deploy to people. We have, as an addition, also taken into this refresh mobile phones, which historically were bought by departments, individuals, and they were actually funded by a revenue. So we are now taking that into capital spend. It is a capital asset. So some colleagues in finance have picked up on that and might be visiting people who've previously bought mobile devices. So we may see a possibility of saving there. And the last point on this is that we have outlined this for a 5-year period where we are asking for a rolling refresh, but we want to be minded that that gives us an indication of what we have today and what it would look like to replace it. But what we will be doing is working on our technical roadmaps to see if that is the right approach, to see if in 3 years' time everyone will need a laptop. There may be a different solution, so we're absolutely not going to go and buy them. And so we'll come back and consult on if anything is to change in that process. I know one of my colleagues, one of my peers in Tim's team, is also looking at our mobile telephony process to see if we can change that. And so we're working together to see if we can offer colleagues the ability to bring their own device effectively. So provide your Bristol City Council capability to a device that is your own. I believe I may have had that in one of our members' briefings. Get a little nod from Councillor Galandras there. But anything we can actually to identify ways to give benefit back is what we're going to look at through this process.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend.
Thank you. Not at all terrifying that you know who we are and where we live and going to hunt us down. So I've got a question about accessibility and inclusion. Is there scope for different devices that have different operating systems? Kind of, especially people who are sort of neurodiverse can find it quite hard to use an Android system quite often. Is there scope built into this to provide Apple operating system devices?
By that you mean so sort of other than telephones and iPads, so laptops, desktops, we do have them in the estate. So I think it is, as with anything, we do whatever we can to support our colleagues, and if that is something that we can make work, we absolutely will. We have actually another team within Tim's area who do our Bristol design, and they are all Mac based. So we do have product in the estate. What we do try and do is look to support colleagues as best we can with our core software. And that's only because what we don't want to do is run the risk of losing sight of exceptions, and we don't want to disadvantage people further by not updating their devices in a timely fashion. But if it is something that we can incorporate into our corporate and existing platforms, then yes, we absolutely will.
Great, thank you. Also very hopeful about sort of changing the rules slightly around using own devices as well. I think that will probably be quite a helpful solution to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also mean less likely I'll lose them, so that's good.
Councillor Whippington.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it sounds like a very sensible proposal, actually. I know, Tim, you said it may mean some devices having their lives stretched a bit, but presumably in the longer run it means that we'll be replacing things before they become redundant. I'm just wondering what happens to all our stuff when we do replace it, whether we could have a rolling program for putting out into the community for people who need it or something like that.
So do you want me to take that? So we do have an arrangement for all of our recycling through Bristol Waste. who are a TECL to the authority. And actually we started in lockdown, so I don't know if that would be a restart, but prior to lockdown, Bristol Waste would recycle the device and they would sell that device to anyone identified in a more deprived group. I think it was at about £100, and they got 12 months support from Bristol Waste. Through lockdown, the authority actually bought all of the devices that we refreshed under ITTP, and we replaced those out. We gave those out to citizens to ensure that nobody was, or as few people as possible, were disadvantaged by not being able to attend school. We provided them also with internet connectivity via dongles to do our absolute utmost actually to minimise disadvantaging any of our citizens.
We're still trying to carry that on through Bristol Waste now, aren't we? Yeah.
Sorry.
Councillor Malik.
Yeah, Councillor Rippington kind of asked the question I wanted to, but I just want to touch on something. The manufacturing a laptop takes and generates a huge substantial carbon footprint. Some estimates say 300 kilograms of CO2 emissions on one laptop. So it's really important that we think about the waste and what we do with it and how we can effectively recycle. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, this requires a vote. So for the clarity of the committee and the benefit of any members of the public present, the recommendation in this resort is that I move the motion for the Committee for Strategy and Resources to 1. Authorise the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to procure and award hardware procurement contracts, which may be above the key decision threshold, in line with the maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report, ranging from 1,719, sorry, I'll start that again, that was going to be a hell of a big computer budget, 1.719 to 1.909 million pounds per annum for up to 5 years, subject to identification of funding within the medium-term financial strategy, including in the capital programme and the approval of the Council's budget for 2025-2026. And 2, to authorise the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contract or contracts being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in this report. Can I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Can all those in favour please raise your hands? That's passed unanimously. Thank you. I now recommend that we take a quick comfort break. It's just coming up to 3:20, so I'll give you 10 minutes, and if we can come back for 3:30, please. Okay, children, let's get back to work. Okay, we now move on to agenda item 11, which is the Arts Council England grant extension. This report seeks approval to accept and spend a one-year extension grant from Arts Council England National Portfolio for Bristol Museums and Museum Development Southwest, and to continue the assisting, which is 2023 to 2026 funded programme of activity in 2026-2027. This funding will be a fixed grant amount in line with the current annual awards for 2023-2026. This is a key decision as it involves spend of over 500,000, and I would like to invite Karen MacDonald, Culture Service, to introduce and outline the report. Karen, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Karen. I'm here in place of Philip Walker, who is on sick leave, unfortunately, today. Yes, so as Councillor Dyer said, Bristol Museums and Museum Development Southwest, which are both part of the Culture and Creative Industries Service, both receive funding from Arts Council England on a 3-year cycle known as National Portfolio Organisations. And the current 3-year cycle began in April 2023 and is due to end in March 2026. However, Arts Council are offering all current national portfolio organisations the opportunity to apply for an additional extension year to the current cycle. So that would be from April 2026 to March 2027. It's a non-competitive process. It requires us just to make a very light touch application through the online portal Grantium by the 19th of December, and we should then hear in February whether this has been accepted. The funding amounts for the extension year will be at the current level, and that is £1,365,000 to Bristol Museums and £650,000 to Museum Development Southwest. Both of the grants are used for some staffing and a significant amount of delivery and engagement work. For Museums Development Southwest, it represents 100% of their programme budget, and for Bristol Museums, it's around 25% of our overall budget. The work that is done with the grants aligns well with social benefit related corporate priorities for Bristol City Council, as well as with Arts Council England's strategy Let's Create. Arts Council will be expecting us to apply, and it will be on the basis of continuing our existing priorities and programmes of work agreed for 2023 to 26. And therefore we are seeking the committee's approval to submit our application for the grant and then to hopefully accept it and spend it duly. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Do I have any questions or comments? Councillor Bleckenshot.
It's more of a comment because I think this is fairly comprehensive. I was just going to make a note that I've sort of only just realised I actually did attend some of these at the museum. The disabled, deaf and neurodivergent artist exhibition was excellent, and I think this is that degree of inclusivity and reaching out and genuinely being so informative is a really great example of what Bristol can do with this kind of funding. So I'm really glad to see that we're going to be getting more of it.
Depends how we vote, Tom. We haven't voted yet. Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Thanks. Yeah, also, again, just a comment, not a question. Just want to say I welcome this because it's really critical for our local economy to support the museums and also in order for us to meet our social and sort of environmental aims as well as a local authority. And also just really glad to see we're kind of building again such a wonderfully warm relationship with the Arts Council as well. So sort of really welcome with enthusiasm the sort of growing relationship with them.
Great, thank you.
Do you want to respond at all, Karen?
No, just to say thank you for both of those comments. Very welcome.
Okay, any further questions or comments? In that case, I'll move to the vote. So, for the clarity of the committee and for the benefit of any members of the public present, the motion I'm proposing is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, approves the proposal to accept and spend a one-year extension grant from Arts Council England, National Portfolio for Bristol Museums and Museum Development Southwest, and to continue the assisting 2023-2026 funded programme of activity in 2026-2027. And 2, authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to submit a bid for, accept and spend funding in accordance with the grant agreement as required by Arts Council England and associated grant-funded activity plans for Bristol Museums and for museum development. Can I ask for a seconder for that motion, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Caroline. Can I ask all those in favour to raise their hands? And that's passed unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, Karen. We now move on to agenda item 12, which is the Collection Fund Surplus Deficit Report. This report sets the estimated collection fund surplus deficit as required by legislation for determination by full council. I would like to invite Tony Kirkham, the Director of Finance, to introduce and outline the report. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. This report is for onward consideration by full council. It's council's requirement that we undertake an evaluation of the potential surplus or deficit in year to the collection fund so that we can notify other preceptors. I'm pleased to say that the report, which sets out the various assumptions and calculations, shows that we would be looking at a surplus in the current financial year should that occur, and it also sets out how that would be distributed. Leave it at that, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Mack.
Yep, I have looked at these and commented on these year after year, and I think I'm always amazed, given the number of uncertainty that goes into it, actually how close we've been. I feel like year on year, and I think that this is, 0.1 of a million on such a large fund is closer than we have been previously, so that's impressive. Although it is actually made up of a number of points that were higher or lower rather than every line being bang on. And so maybe I'd comment on there being more student exemptions than we expected, because do we not have a reasonable idea, or what can we do to have a better idea next year of the student exemptions?
Chair, when we come to the next report, we're looking at the potential for student exemptions into the next council tax base. It is quite an interesting trend. We did anticipate that the trend would have started to decline or flatten, given the university market, but actually we've seen a continued increase. So you'll see in the next report that we've taken that into account and built in another level. We will obviously work with the universities as part of the process. Registration through the universities, as you can imagine, is later in the year, so we're always sort of catching up in relation to the data, but we'll work with the universities and review that data and information as it comes through.
Thank you. Councillor Gooch.
No questions, just a few observations really. The reduction in liability due to delay in dwelling completion just seems that we're bad at delivering on approved plans as a city. The increase in exemptions, we have got an increasing number of student accommodations. Probably, university cities are overburdened with student exemptions, and it would be nice if the government would implement a subsidy scheme for local authorities with high student numbers to account for this. The reduction in allowance for impairment of debts means we're better at collecting arrears and not writing off as much as previously, which is good. And our council tax reduction scheme is still quite generous, but reducing over time. So that's all I'd say.
Do you want to respond?
Chair, in relation to student exemptions, if you look back in history over the methods of distribution of grant to local authorities, it was reflected. I think it's fair to say it's significantly out of date. The new government has undertaken to do a review of distribution methods, so obviously Bristol will be given the opportunity, and most of the core cities will be given an opportunity to look at that in much more detail.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blenkinsop.
Chair. I was just on that point of the council tax reduction scheme. Obviously, the numbers claimed are also dropping there. I was wondering if we had any idea why that number seems to be steadily decreasing.
I haven't done an analysis of the individual items. It's a relatively small number in comparison to the number of people that we do, but as part of the work which we'll be doing in the new year to review the overall scheme, again, we can look at why those trends are occurring, but they're relatively small given the size and scale of the number of people we support.
Yeah, I'm just curious whether or not we need to make that more widely known, if there's problems around information or if there's some other explanation. So just curiosity there.
It could be as simple as average earnings increasing.
I think one of the things that we've put on the work programme for the Strategy and Resources Committee is about looking in more detail about how we address or support low-income households. So that's a piece of work going forward. And now look at various things, including the outsourced support fund, or what may we place that under the new government as well. So I think it's something that we are conscious of, about making sure we are able to provide support for those who need it the most. Any more questions or comments? Councillor Mack?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to comment on that council tax point, because I wouldn't say the reductions has been about 15% reduction since 2020 in working age claimants, if my maths is right, 25,000 to a bit under 22,000. So I'd say that's quite a significant drop. But I think what's difficult is we now look at things over a 5-year period, backwards over 5 years, and it's tricky when we're looking over COVID time. And so I guess some of that, it would be helpful to look at pre-COVID time, because I think that the 2020 figure was a massive increase in the COVID year. But I do feel reassured that we fought to keep the council tax reduction scheme over the last couple of years, and hopefully that the scheme existing has helped support people out of needing the scheme versus taking it away. And it is nice to see that those numbers are coming down.
Okay. If there's no more questions or comments, then I think we'll move to the vote. So for the clarity of the committee and for the benefit of any members of the public present, I'd like to move the motion that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves the report and calculations as set out in the report and refer to full council for approval. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Can I ask for all those in favour to show their hands? Okay, we now move on to agenda item number 13, which is council tax base for 2025-2026. This report recommends the council tax base 25-26 for approval by Strategy and Resources for referral to full council. And I'd like to invite Tony Kirkham again to present this report.
Again, Chair, relatively briefly, the report sets out the assumptions which we've identified and evaluated as part of a detailed process to project where the council tax base will be next year. You'll see it shows an overall just below 1% growth once you take into account all the various different factors, including a further improvement in collection rates and a reduction in relation to single person discounts after undertaking an exercise in year to review that. It's there to go forward to full council and obviously informs again the preceptors in relation to their budget assumptions going forward.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? No, in that case, I'll go immediately to the vote. So, for the benefit of members and members of the public present, the motion is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approve the report and calculated amount as set out in this report and refer it to full council for approval. Can I ask for a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's passed unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 14, which is the Period 7 Finance Update Report for 24-25. This report presents information and analysis to the committee on the Council's financial performance against the approved budget and its forecast use of resources for the financial year 24-25. The report also informs the committee on the delivery of planned savings in the financial year 2024-2025. Most of the recommendations in this report are for noting, but there is one key decision as set out in relation to the revised capital budget. I'd like to invite Tony Curtin once again to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is period 7 position. Obviously, this committee has seen a number of reports over the financial year, which shows the trend analysis in this space. In relation to the general fund position, there is a slight improvement since the last time committee considered this area, and a slight improvement in relation to savings delivered in year. There are obviously a number of risks within the system which we still look to manage, and obviously the activity is to bring down any potential overspend as much as we can in year, so that it has a little impact upon the council's reserves as possible. Housing revenue account shows a small improvement in the overall position, and the dedicated schools grant shows a further deterioration in the overall position. And as the Chair said, in relation to the capital programme, there is a further revision based on deliverability and affordability of schemes moving forward. Happy to answer questions, Chair.
Any questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I'll move directly, first of all, to the noting. So, can I ask that Strategy and Resources Committee notes the following? 1, the Council's General Fund forecast outturn revenue overspend of 17.1 million at P7 24-25 against the Council approved budget of 533.7 million. 2, the performance on delivery of savings. 3, the additional weighted net risk of 6.1 million per the Risk and Opportunities Register. 4, the Council's outturn position of 13.7 million overspend within the housing revenue account to be transferred to the HRA General Reserve at the year end. 5, the Council's outturn position of a 31.9 million overspend, net 15.3 million, in the dedicated schools grant, and that this brings the carry forward deficit to 90.5 million. Following the application of the DFE's 24-25 safety valve, combined with contribution from the General Fund, a total of 52.4 million is forecast to be carried forward at the year end in the DSG deficit reserve. 6, the break-even position on public health services. 7, the break-even position on the Bristol Harbour Fund. And 8, the Council's forecast underspend of 26 million against the capital programme revised budget 24-25, comprised of £19 million underspend on the General Fund, including 8.2 million underspend on corporate contingency and funds, and 7 million underspend on the HRA. Can I ask that Strategy and Resources note that report? We then have one item to vote on. So I'd like to move that the committee approves revisions to the revised capital budget to incorporate the reprofiling of up to 19 million General Fund and 7 million HRA budget into future years following the forecast underspend at period 7. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please?
Seconded.
Can I ask all those in favour to show their hands? Thank you. All those against, show your hands. Thank you. That's carried 6 votes to 3. We now move on to agenda item 15, which is the Property Transformation Programme Quarterly Update. This report provides an update on the progress of the Property Transformation Programme. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. And I would like to invite Peter Anderson Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure, to introduce and outline the report.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully you'll be familiar with the report format. This is our quarterly update, and I know there was an update on the transformation programme as a whole early on the meeting, so hopefully this relates closely to the points that were raised, but with more detail. So it does bring to life in terms of development and progress made, which is, I'm pleased to say, is good progress in relation to the 7 strands of work highlighted in the report across the programme. There's been good progress in relation to activity towards savings. So you'll see in the report that there's a target of £1.2 million of revenue savings that the programme is seeking to achieve, and we are on track for both the 1.2 million savings as well as the 0.7 million one-off savings, which is really positive. We continue to work hard in relation to our surplus process in relation to identifying capital receipts from disposal, and we continue to deliver against that target, clearly aiming for a target which is still remaining at 21 million. And we've got an item after this as well, which we can go into that a bit further. The paper also brings out milestones in terms of what we've achieved in August to November, but it separates out December to February. So you'll see the status of where we are, particularly around our hard FM contracts, the retendering process, as well as corporate catering. I'd just like to highlight the good work that the team and partners and colleagues based in 100 Temple Street have done in relation to working with our NHS colleagues to occupy the large proportion of the north wing, as well as to refit the reception for new reception works. So there's still works to be done in relation to access lift, as well as the disabled access to the building, but that's built into the programme as we move forward. You'll see also the profile of savings that we are still seeking to achieve through the programme for 1.2 million for next year, so it's 25-26, which we've got active plans worked up with high confidence to deliver. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Dodd.
Thanks for that, Tony. Thanks, Pete. Can I just ask if is Sandy Park Depot being dealt with as part of this programme, or is that kind of outside of this programme?
When we established the property transformation last June, there was a strand of work around depots. So we currently have 30 plus depots across the city, but it was deprioritised in relation to a piece of work prioritising on these 7 strands. Mm-hmm. So depots are a clear category of asset for us in relation to our corporate landlord service. So it's something that is in view, but not through this programme.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, as I said, this report is for noting. So can I ask that the committee note 1, that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the update report on progress of the Property Transformation Programme, and 2, that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes no funding has been formally approved for 25-26. The budget request for 25-26 is subject to change and will be requested via COB. Can I take that as noted? Thank you. We'll now move on to the final agenda item 16, which is the Estate Rationalisation Surplus Asset Disposal. There is an exempt section to this report, so we may need to move into exempt session if we want to ask questions about that. The report seeks approval of the disposal of particular council assets which have been identified following analysis of the council's estate. This is a key decision as it involves savings over £500,000 and impacts on 2 or more wards. And as I said, this report includes an exempt appendix which has been circulated to members. In the event that any member wishes to raise a matter specifically in relation to the exempt information, it is likely to be necessary for the committee to move into exempt session. Before we do that, I would like to invite Pete Anderson, Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure, to introduce and outline the report. Pete.
Thanks, Chair. So the report is written with no change in relation to the main body of the report from the deferred item from November. The exempt item, further to conversations at last committee, has had more information added to demonstrate and understand the rationale of the decisions that's informed
the request in relation to assets for surplus. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Any questions or comments or requests? Councillor Mack.
Yeah, I think that it's very emotive when we're talking about removing assets from our estate in whatever way, and I think that there can also be quite a lot of misunderstanding about it. I think we need to consider when properties are bringing in significant income or when they're supporting our services, and obviously that's a crucial part of it, and we are looking at how these properties are being used. But when they don't do that and they are costing us money, there is obviously going to be times when it is sensible and it's best use of our assets to not have them. And I also want to mention about the capital receipts. You know, we are getting money back in return for properties, and that helps us do all sorts of things, such as what we've just agreed of, purchasing housing, or examples like that to house people, or whether it's adult social care that we're using it for. And also the use in our transformation programmes, and how that's ultimately improving our services. And I think it's really important to note, and I'm just saying some of these things because I have noticed a misunderstanding, especially amongst members of the sort of, I've heard fire sale, or, are we getting rid of things now that because of our tight budget situation, but we can't just sell assets in order to balance the books next year. That's not what we're doing. Obviously, capital receipts must be used in a capital manner rather than just balancing our revenue budget. So I just want to be really clear that, it's not necessarily something that we want to be doing, but we consider it very carefully, as is happening in my the property disposals working group, which has already met twice. It will meet 3 times in about 10 days because we're so keen. And we went through these items last week, just that we'd really spent some time looking at them and the reasons we'd be doing something like this. So I support what's in this report.
Councillor Blenkinsop.
With regards to...
I think that's exempt, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. That's why I think we ought to...
Are you requesting that we go into exempt session?
We can...
All right. Well, can you put your microphone on? Basically, what?
Sorry.
In short, it is in relation to an item. In terms of how we vote, I think that at least one of the items should be voted on separately. That was a request.
Yeah, I think we've sorted that.
Okay, if that's been...
That's already... I had a request from the Labour League.
Am I allowed
just
to
before
then
this
speak
meeting
about
started.
that separate item and ask a question about it, because I think it is relevant to the...
But that paper's exempt.
Carl, you need to put your microphone on. Remember, we are being webcast. And I'm sure you want members of the public to know what you're
Chair.
saying.
Sorry, I'm just trying to help people out here. So we've got a number of... So we've got some questions about the exempt items. So I don't know how you want to deal with it as the chair. Do you want to deal with stuff that can be dealt with here first and then go into an exempt session, or should we go there now and then come back? Is obviously up to you.
Okay, well, I think it's probably better if I'll just ask if any members have got any questions about anything that they know is not going to be in a exempt session, and then once we've dealt with them, we'll move into a exempt session. Well, I'll put a vote forward first and move into a exempt session. Councillor Malik.
So, Chair, just for public interest, I think, can I know how the properties that are on this list would have been prioritised for disposal? So it'd be probably, is it because they were beyond economical kind of repair and use? And the second thing is that the £33 million that we've just talked about in terms of 70 units, why couldn't some of these properties be used for accommodation or for refurbishment and to try and provide a solution to some of the housing issues?
Some of them are being provided for temporary accommodation. I think, Tim, do you want to ask a question? And then we'll move into a session. I'll put a vote for a session.
Thank you, Chair. I've raised some of these questions at the property working group, but this is a public session, so I feel it's worth airing them again. I do have some concerns about disposal of assets to registered providers who may not be in the market for very long, given the volatile nature of that kind of thing. And therefore, while I can see the arguments for us doing it, because there may be upfront capital costs in converting properties to be used for adult social care, I do also think there's an argument for us retaining those properties and leasing them to the registered providers, so that if they were to exit the market, we would have the properties still available and they'd be available for somebody else to use. So that's one of the concerns I have about the properties that we are handing over, and I'm just wondering, whether there are comments on that in terms of its feasibility.
Yeah, I think my only comment would be that one of the properties that's on here for disposal wasn't at any point going to be disposed to a registered provider. It's on here simply because another organisation wasn't able to complete the work that was being done. So I think there is the potential. We can't be for certain, even if we went for a commercial provider, for another provider, about how we are living in very difficult times, and a lot of organisations, not just registered providers, are facing difficulties. But what I'll do, Pete, do you want to, or John?
I completely understand that concern, Councillor Ruffington. There are some protections which I think are helpful to sort of to manage that risk, which I'll let Pete run through. Chair, I was going to come back to Councillor Malik's question. I think we could answer that in public session if you're comfortable with that. So, Councillor Malik, about the selection of properties, as Pete ran through in the previous paper, actually, we have a target that we agree with finance colleagues and with Cabinet previously, obviously, for this year, and that's what we work to through the year, and we bring forward potential opportunities, and through this internal disposal process, which allows internal or parts of the organisation to effectively bid for the properties. But we work through those that are currently available and those which can have, we work closely with finance for those that have the minimal impact on a revenue basis. And that's how things are prioritised and come forward. Is that helpful? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So working closely with adult care colleagues, I just wanted further to the last committee, in terms of in the unlikely scenario that an RP was to go bust, for a better word, the service only works with RPs that achieve the highest rating of governance and viability assessment, which is outlined by the social housing regulator. So that's the highest level of assurance that we can achieve or get reassurance from an assessment. If the RP was to go bust, the property lease would be transferred to another compliant RP. The building itself would be owned by an investor, not the RP. So therefore, the process is relatively straightforward. We would be able to utilise another RP. So therefore, there wouldn't be a gap in service.
So even though we've disposed of the property, we still have an ability to make sure it doesn't just go into.
Yes.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Dudd, have you got questions you think can only be answered in the exempt session? Is that
yeah,
correct?
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to move a motion that under Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the ground that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3, Schedule 12A of the Act. Can I get a seconder for that motion?
Seconded.
Can I ask for all those in favour to show their hands? That's unanimous. So we will now move into exempt session.
It's
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're now back in public session. Thank you for the in-depth conversation in exempt session. I realise it can be annoying for members of the public, but sometimes it is necessary. We have decided as a group, or I've decided as Chair of the Strategy and Resources, as probably don't want to put the blame on anybody else, that we are going to take the vote in sections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the recommendations for the report, and then I am going to ask you to vote separately for one group, then a second group, and then a final group. And before I do the final group, I'll explain why we're doing it that way. Okay, so the vote we are about to take is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves operational assets as listed and described by the Chair of Strategy and Resources prior to the vote as surplus to council requirements and subject to them not being considered suitable for HRA transfer or sold to a registered provider to be disposed of on the open market for the best consideration achievable. That the Strategy and Resources Committee approves the investment assets listed in Appendix C be declared surplus to council requirements where applicable and subject to them not being considered suitable for HRA transfer or sold to a registered provider to be disposed of on the open market for the best consideration achievable. That seems to be a complete repeat of the first paragraph. Let me start that bit again then, because we appear to have a double entry. That's the same. All right, my apologies, I'll start again. So there's only 2 recommendations, not 3. All right. Okay. So I am going to read again because I can't read one single word. Well, approves the operational assets listed in Appendix C be declared surplus to council requirements and subject to them not being considered suitable for HRA transfer or sold to a registered provider to be disposed of on the open market for the best consideration achievable. Yes, what I'm going to read out all 3 statements and then I'm going to say we're going to vote because we would have done it as a block previously.
So what I'm trying to say is number 1 is the operational assets that I believe everyone's happy with. This is already splitting the assets into
No, I don't think it's clear enough, and I don't think our colleagues think it's clear enough. So, approves the operational assets listed in Appendix C to be declared surplus to council requirements and subject to them not being considered suitable for HRA transfer or sold to a registered provider to be disposed of on the open market for the best consideration achievable. Approves the investment assets listed in Appendix E to be declared surplus to council requirements where applicable and subject to them not being considered suitable for HRA transfer or sold to a registered provider to be disposed of on the open market for the best consideration achievable. And finally, authorises the Executive Director, Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Section 151 officer, in accordance with the Council's scheme of delegations, to take all steps required for the disposal of the assets whilst ensuring best value is obtained for each property listed in the exempt Appendix E in the event they are not required by the HRA to satisfy an alternative service requirement. We're now going to take a vote, and I'll ask Caroline if you were second each part of this. So the first vote is to apply those 3 conditions to the following properties: Summerhill Centre, Jubilee Hall, East Bristol Interim Care Centre. Can I ask for a seconder?
I'm a little bit confused, but
Those first three items.
the first, I know it's the first three items, but yeah, for the HRA transfer, yes, I second that.
So these properties are going to be made available to registered providers.
Yes, I second those three properties being made available to registered providers.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour, please show your hands. And that's unanimous. For the following two properties, which are to go to auction, the two properties are Delaware House and Nelson Parade. To apply the three conditions to these properties, can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
All those in favour of dispose of these properties via auction, please show your hands now. All those against, please show your hands now. Sits free. Finally, to defer the two properties that are in exempt. We can't do that way simply because they're both in exempt session. So there are two other properties which have been in exempt session both in this session and in the previous session. The reason why they're exempt is because they're subject to commercial confidentiality. However, what I'm asking for us to do is, because I cannot separate them without identifying, I'm asking put your microphone on and tell me what.
Chair, can I suggest that you refer to which order they are in the report, and we'll just make sure that everyone is clear when you have mentioned one.
Okay, except I don't have access to the exempt papers, so I don't know which order they're in.
Could you quote the property IDs? Does that work? Oh, they're available publicly, are they? Okay.
Okay, so the first item was the one that we were discussing at most length. So the proposal is to defer the decision regarding that particular asset to allow officers to further explore options. Can I get a seconder for that proposal? You need to say it.
I second that proposal.
All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hands. So is that unanimous? Okay, thank you. And then for the final item, which is also commercially sensitive, to apply the conditions identified previously to the second commercial asset, can I ask for that to be seconded?
Seconded.
All those in favour, please show your hands. All those against, please show your hands. Sits free. Thank you. That concludes that we vote, and that concludes Strategy and Resources Committee for another day. Thank you.